You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
These obscenities that man has created, the corruption, the pollution, all these will be annihilated. Nature will reclaim its dominion. The earth will breathe again.
This is the future you see for Tokyo?
You've been chosen by fate to fight for the city.
I won't take responsibility for it.
You will meet deadly enemies. 7 separate dragons that will awaken to destroy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to take along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are talking about some undead ladies, so join the sleaze.
Very true. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover as well. And Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for 8 years now. There's I legitimately can't count how many bonus episodes there are at this point. It's getting pretty ridiculous, as well as our bonus transmission series. I know it's over 200 at this point.
Yes,
it's
sir.
It's got to be 210, as
Which means
well
we've
as
done
our
400 movies.
It's ridiculous. Exclusively over on the Patreon too.
Yeah.
Overall, we've done. We're broaching 900 over here, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films all throughout the year. And we have been collecting some January trash genre movies we are very excited to talk about over there soon. So you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. We recommend doing that. And speaking of which, we had a bunch of people make the jump this week. I guess I should give them their shout outs here. We had Howard sign up at $5 a month. We had Eric, Taylor, Jonathan Johnson, Evren Zevic, Ophir Bernstein, Dr. Herbert West, hopefully, from Reanimator, who actually signed up at the annual tier, is going to be getting a little bit of a monthly discounted rate by getting an entire year of the show in advance. And we also had actually Adam Smith upgraded from $5 a month to $10 a month and is joining us for the monthly virtual screening at the end of the month, usually on the last Thursday of any given month. We also had Sean Morrison sign up, Adam, Kevin, Hugh, Jealous Cactus, Charlie Myers, Corey Mitchell, Uberlane Gizbar, and Trencher Manvor. So thanks so much to all of you folks. We appreciate that support and hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
That's the one plug for the week. As always, the other plug is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, I can see the stats. I can see you right now listening on both those platforms. Give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you haven't yet and you are interested in a Sleazoids dad cap or in our Sleazoids poster blowout themed t-shirt designed by a friend of the pod, Brandon Lim of Black Belt Cinema, with a very beautiful design, head to the link in the description of this episode to go and get yours, or at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I'm your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have had special returning guest Branson Reese, our classic and exploitation animation correspondent, back on the show to talk about some animation for evil perverts, by and for. We talked about Ralph Bakshi, obviously, with his very crude and psychedelic and autobiographical, fantastical rendition of his own upbringing in the Lower East Side as a Jewish immigrant, or at least a child of Jewish immigrants in Heavy Traffic in 1973, commonly kind of considered his most personal and maybe even best movie. And then we paired it with a very beautiful yet looking, yet incredibly troubling and disturbing cyberpunk neo-noir anime by Yoshiaki Kawajiri called Wicked City from 1987.
Yep, that would be the way to describe it. Gorgeous film, but absolutely disgusting. And yeah, the Bakshi one feels...
Branson Reese apologized. There are very few guests who come on the show and go, I picked the movie and I kind of forgot some of the things we would have to be talking about in order to do that.
Yeah, it was quite the discussion on the podcast. But yeah, and then Bakshi's feels very personal, regardless of how much like Looney Tunes chaos there is. It's strangely... feels very maybe in like a kind of a questionable way, very personal.
A little too personal.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know that about your mom and dad, bro.
Yeah.
But thanks for letting us know. And it's crazy that they let him put it X-rated on the screen in animation in the 1970s. So
yeah.
Very pioneering guy in that field regardless. So if you haven't heard that episode, again, that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. But then last week over on the Patreon exclusively, we did a very interesting double feature that one of our patrons has been kind of pitching us on for like a year or so. And we finally said, look, he almost won the Patreon poll a number of times. He never quite did because I think one of the movies just wasn't quite popular enough to get like the broad vote of everybody. But I kept seeing it and being like, that would be a cool double feature. So we finally did it over on the Patreon. And that was a double feature of Americans going crazy, thinking about the history of U.S. intervention in Latin America. So we talked about Alex Cox's very pointedly kind of anti-imperialist acid Western farce about America's delusional, sort of like self-image as cowboy liberators in a movie called Walker from 1987, starring Ed Harris, and Ed Harris absolutely goes blank face psycho in that as that movie goes on. It was very fun to talk about, and also that movie absolutely torched Alex Cox's career. So he went out of the Hollywood studio system with giant middle fingers at America. That was very amusing to talk about. And then the pairing was one of the stranger underground pseudo documentaries that we have ever been presented with. It is essentially a collage experimental film called Tribulation 99 or Alien Anomalies Under America. And the best way I could like describe it in a quick log line, it's kind of like the paranoid hysteria of Oliver Stone's kind of like conspiracy alternate history movies was kind of blended with like that Adam Curtis like newsreel pop culture like video essay, but just like imagine it comes at you so fast you feel like you're being hypnotized.
Yeah, it's an absolute brain melter. It mixing all these like kind of these real events and documentary footage, and then like mixing it with movies, and it just feels, by the end of it, you are exhausted. I'll say that, even for 45 minutes. And Walker it's a shame that Alex Cox lost his career after that. It's so punk rock and loose and very funny, to be honest, for as dark as it is.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode, again, that was over on the Patreon, patreon.com/SLEAZOIDS podcast last week. Go back and go check it out if you're interested. But moving on to this week, we are once again joined by a very special returning guest, author, filmmaker, librarian, video store clerk, and friend of the pod who likes to show us all kinds of the spectrum of extreme Asian cinema and whatever insanely weird and underseen and underrated shit he can find out there. We carve out an annual spot for him to show us a movie that has like under 1,000 logs on Letterboxd. And that guest is Perry Ruhland. Perry, welcome back, man.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, last time we were talking with you, it was sometime last year, and I think we were talking about it was last May we were talking with you, and you brought on one of the few movies that it was very difficult to talk about. We talked about after last season with you, and we talked about Angel Dust. Angel Dust is more classic Perry. Like I kind of go, like the Japanese. It's got a little bit of like an extreme horror vibe to it, but it's not that far out of the realm of like a Sato movie or I guess some of the I don't know. You came up a lot 2 weeks ago with Branson because we were kind of like Wicked City feels like something Perry would have shown us at some point, but we were like, well, maybe he kind of even beat this with Midori, and then Branson was like, you guys are talking about Midori? Well, then shut the fuck up. Don't complain about this. Yeah.
That was in like our first or second year, I think, too.
Yeah, so that is the reputation that you have on this show, Perry, and so that's why we just let you go crazy with it. So what double feature have you brought with you this week, and what unites the two?
Well, this week I've brought 2 adaptations of some very gothy comics. Those comic books are X by Clamp and The Crow by James O'Barr. And those adaptations are X, the movie by Rintaro, an animated movie, and not The Crow with Brandon Lee, but James O'Barr's The Crow, which is a shot-on-video readaptation of the comic made by a bunch of teenagers in Ohio with no money.
Yeah, that's what
it's
we
our
love.
bread and butter on this show, man. We love that shit.
Absolutely. Especially when it's made as well as it is. So it's going to be cool.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so good.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked by I mean, not X the movie, because X the movie, again, we've been in a weird, like, we've been in a J-horror space, and then also the fact that, Branson also brought on a sort of like anime film recently. So we've been we felt like we were prepared to be in that zone. And when you talked about James O'Barr's The Crow, I was like, I literally don't know what the fuck this is. And it has literally just over 100 logs on Letterboxd. And I was like, you know what? We'll give it to Perry. We trust Perry. What are we doing here? And the fact that you brought on like a version of The Crow that is essentially also merged with our interest in shot on video horror, or something like Charles Pinion's Twisted Issues, which we screened last year, or honestly another movie had made me think about a lot was Deadbeat at Dawn by Jim Beber.
Totally.
Which is also another Ohio guy just like making a movie in his backyard, basically. So doing a backyard do-it-yourself version of The Crow, and the fact that it's as good as it is incredibly surprising and cool. So if you haven't seen James O'Barr's The Crow, you'll want to stick around for that conversation. And it's also just on YouTube. You can search for it. David Ullman has uploaded that, as well as the documentary about the making of, which I'm surprised any teenager thought to also record like the process, but they did that too. So
and that's the way he puts it together is very much like a behind the scenes documentary kind of thing that you'd throw on a bonus feature.
And not only is there a do-it-yourself version of The Crow made by 14-year-olds in Ohio, there is also like the Hearts of Darkness like movie about it as well. Like it's crazy that both of those things exist. So it's very, very cool. And that being said, I think we're just going to jump right into it here. So let's kick things off, and we'll talk about, I guess we'll go A picture, B picture. One of these movies is a lot more known than the other one. We will talk about X the movie.
This is the beginning, man. The beginning of the end. The beginning of the final battle.
All right, we are talking X, the movie, the 1996 action fantasy sort of science fiction horror at times anime, written and directed by Rintaro, co-written by Nanase Okawa, who was helping him adapt her own manga series by her and her all-female creative group called Clamp, as Perry already mentioned, and starring some relatively popular Japanese voice actors, including Junko Owo, who was in Perfect Blue and Evangelion, Ken Narita, who's in Code Geass and Inuyasha, and Tomokazu Seki as the sort of teenage protagonist. I'm going to see if I can remember how to say this. Kamui Shiro, who is a psychic who, as the logline goes here, basically returns home to Tokyo just as some sort of apocalyptic war is taking place between the dragons of the heaven and the dragons of the earth. And we will get into some of the crazy world building and lore that takes place in this movie. I'm sure Perry will be able to help us, because Perry is actually familiar with these mangas as well. But
beautiful.
This is our first time talking about pretty much all the creatives involved here, including Rintaro, who is a pretty well-known animator for his early work on Astro Boy in the 1960s, and also for having a pretty prolific career capped off by his science fiction anime Metropolis in 2001, which seems to be his most beloved work. But Perry, have you seen other like Rintaro stuff?
Yeah, I love Rintaro. He's been in Japanese feature animation basically since the beginning. He worked on Tail the White Serpent, which was the first color Japanese animated feature. And
Crazy.
he worked at Mushi Pro directly under Osamu Tezuka, who is sort of the godfather of anime, the creator of Astro Boy and many, many others. And he's gone on to direct his own projects. I believe he directed the movie of Galaxy Express 999, which is by Leiji Matsumoto, another legendary anime and manga figure. And he's mostly done. He's done a lot of OVAs, which I've seen. There's one called Take the X Train, which is amazing. And then, Metropolis is his big one, which is another Tezuka adaptation.
Do you have a favorite?
Probably Take the X Train.
Okay.
It's a very compact little science fiction story that's based around Duke Ellington's music, where
cool.
a guy has a psychic connection to a train, and it's all just kind of buoyed along by the music. But I love this one too.
Okay, awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, so Rintaro, very, very acclaimed, very well-known animator. I mean, especially by the time by the mid 90s, like he was just a name that everybody knew. He made sense if they were adapting a new popular manga series, which I guess is exactly what they were kind of doing here. They floated his name as someone who, there was a very popular manga that was being written here in X, which again, written by an all-female manga, sort of like writing and sort of illustrating group called Clamp, which includes Satsuki Igarashi, Tsubaki Nikoi, and Makona, and again, Nanase Okawa, who directly consulted on the film adaptation and seemed to be sort of the most heavily involved creator in the original manga, who was making sure that, sort of specific themes and maybe sort of sense of style was being, faithfully adapted. And Perry, as someone who is like familiar with the manga, would you say that Rintaro does justice?
Kind of. He turns it into something a lot crueler than the manga, because something to know about X is X was never finished. It was
that I did read. Like, it's still not finished even now.
No, I mean, it went on hiatus and they just never picked it up. But it was this big epic that has a great mixture of like more lighthearted slice of life stuff at the beginning, and then some. There's action, but there's comedy and there's a lot of character work. And X, the movie, is sort of a very brutal version of it, where kind of everything except for the pained emotions and the action scenes is kind of shorn off. And then Rintaro worked together with Nanase Okawa to come up with a new ending, or I guess any ending to the story, which is pretty bleak. And it's just sort of a very sad viewing experience in a way that reading the manga isn't.
What section of the manga are we in with this movie? Is this in the middle? Is this at the tail end before they started the hiatus?
No. It is a very truncated version of more or less everything that happens until there's a big apocalyptic battle at the end. So, And by very truncated, I mean the first action scene in it, which happens about 10 minutes into the movie, you have to be like 4 volumes into the manga to get something equivalent.
Okay.
It's really just cutting everything except the barest character introductions and then some fights that they sort of stitch together. And then
that was what I kind of read seemed to be kind of the general consensus, is that like visually and in terms of sort of like handling the sort of like main sort of trajectory of the plot and some of the main characters, that it was a well done movie. But for a lot of people who are really fans of the manga, and like the complete story here has been reduced to a lot. Like there's like a lot of the roles of the supporting ensemble is people, it seemed like fans weren't really stoked about that, because it was like you kind of get their name, you find out like they have like a quirk, and then because he's like wrapping up this story quickly, it's like, oh, that character died. And sometimes you're like, I don't even know if I remembered that character's name. Unfortunately, that was kind of my experience with this, is that I felt like watching the movie felt like I had kind of turned on like the like end of Evangelion and hadn't watched like the rest of it. I was like, oh, I'm at like the apocalyptic like season finale, and all of these like, you know, sort of like YA, you know, sort of characters who have these relationships with each other. There's like an emotional gravity to this big action climax they're all experiencing, but like I didn't necessarily feel like I had the connection to them, because like the opening of this movie, like I actually think it has a really cool like introductory thing where it gives you that like hallucinatory sort of dreamlike sort of visions from the psychic teenager being shown like his mother pulling a sword out of her body, like birthing from her, and he's got to go fight for the city, and kind of introducing you to this sort of ancient battle that's taking place between these various forces. But as soon as they go, oh, speed run, by the way, here is the princess, you're going to want to trust the princess, do not trust the princess's evil sister, Kanoe. Here's all your eventual crew members named like Sorota. He's trustworthy. Yuzahira is the granddaughter of a great grandmaster. She also has a phantom dog named Nuki. Here's someone named Arashi, who is a brave maiden of the Eastern and like literally that's how fast the movie is doing it. And I was like, at a certain point, I was like, I cannot keep up with this.
That's original to the dub. The Japanese version of the opening montage of all the characters is completely silent.
Gotcha.
Which is, I think that, I mean, they must have changed it because, you know, X was just not a known quantity in America when it came out. So like, okay, as you said, there's literally narration where it's like, trust her, don't trust her. This is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. Yeah. And yeah, the Japanese original kind of lets it breathe a little bit more.
It lets it play a little bit more like surreal, like mysterious, like who are these people, but like he's having dreams about them in a way.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The movie was my first introduction to X. And actually, I saw the movie 3 times before I ever read the manga, because I really, really loved the movie when I first saw it. A lot of it came from, I guess, the same sense of disorientation you were talking about, where I did not know who these people are. I didn't really understand what they were fighting for. But I understood the movie is always on, as you said, that kind of season finale, heightened apocalyptic stakes, where everything that happens is so big and so operatic. And the last third of the movie is like death scenes one after another, where it's these characters
pretty crazy.
Being like, I wish I could have told you I love you, and then dies. And then another character says something like that and then dies. And it has this really concussive, dramatic quality where they're not going to bother giving you like a properly structured drama as much as going to be like, you're going to feel something because we are going to hit you very hard in the head with all these characters. And I don't know. I was very taken by that, especially with the movie sort of being about, you know, the core of it is these 2 boys who are friends, and then they're forced to fight on different sides this cosmic war, and then one ends up killing the other. And the way this sort of the disillusion of the friendship, instead of being, I guess, properly developed, is just played out by, here's an externalization of how bad it feels for this guy to lose everything. So you're going to see everyone die. You're going to see the city get destroyed. His home's going to get destroyed. And he's just
literally seeing visions of like his best friend being murdered by his other best friend, or like seeing visions of like the entire Tokyo cityscape becoming this like apocalyptic hellscape essentially, and be basically just being like, if you don't be like kill your friend, this is all going to happen. Like that's, you know how you're introduced to all this information.
It does feel like the way that things move so quickly, it really gives an accent to how like or weight to how much like there's real consequences to everything. Like everything does feel very dangerous, even when these characters are being introduced. And when they're introduced, 9 times out of 10 they have like a certain confidence about them. They say their name, they're about to fight, there's something like that. But them being so quickly taken out after a certain point, because this movie also is only, you know, like 90 minutes long or something like that. So, you know, you get kind of introduced to these characters and they're taken away so quickly. It feels like even as powerful as they are, it won't save them in this world. And there's a bunch of themes of like, you know, sacrifice and all of that. The major choice ultimately is save the earth or save mankind. So it kind of does have this like the bad guys in a way, or bad guys, whatever you want to call them, are like environmental like terrorists basically, or something like that. They're
dragons
like,
of the
planet.
earth.
Yeah.
They're very much, mankind is like ruining the planet, and so we need like to take a break from mankind, and by that we mean we need to unleash cleansing dragon fire upon all of the humans of Tokyo, which is something the dragons of heaven do not want to see happen.
And talking about, the cleansing dragon fire, it seems like one of the main reasons why Rintaro took the project would be to get to put those kind of apocalyptic images in, because I'd say about half of the movie is like there is strobing red lightning flashing across the screen. There are these incredibly detailed sequences of concrete buildings crumbling. There are these giant dragons flying around and blowing up buildings. There's, as far as destruction of buildings per minute goes, it's hard to think of an animated movie that has this as high a ratio.
The one thing I notice in particular too is that it doesn't focus a lot on, like, despite the fact that there's all this destruction going on, there's skyscrapers falling left and right. They show like all of the the falling pillars and everything like that, but they don't focus until maybe the very end on any of the civilians that are reacting to it, which I found interesting. They really do kind of hyper focus on just these godly like characters that are trying to save the people around them, almost as if
I do like that they
this...
try to get around that too, by also each character is able to conjure a protective shield that is designed to like reduce any sort of collateral damage, because they were like, this is a sort of personal battle. It is for the earth, and ultimately we are going to kill certain people, but we're not going to kill them in this immediate fight that we're having. So we summon this protective shield. They fight within the protective shield typically, even though a lot of the drama or the use of that imagery is that one of the cool details I like, and I don't know if it maybe comes from the manga or from the movie, but the idea that like the protective shield is summoned by a specific character who has like that sort of energy or that power, and then when that character dies, the shield also disappears. So there's lots of moments in the battles where the character who has summoned the protective shield to avoid killing people is killed, and you get the massive wide image of like the shield just slowly sort of like fading away and disappearing while the life is leaving their body, and then destruction starts hitting the city because the shield is gone. So that happens at least 3 or 4 times in the movie, I think, and it's actually just like a cool visual way to be like, you feel the expressive size of that death of that character watching that shield just like completely fade away.
And the shields are all done with 3D graphics, I believe. Very early CG. There's also CG in one of the dream sequences where Kamui is inside of a glass earth. He's sort of floating around in this little 3D CG sphere.
It's got like the Glinda the Good Witch like bubble going on when he's being shown visions. To
the point of the shields going down, the buildings collapsing, I do think a lot of the creative energy here is spent on like, how do we show different landmarks getting destroyed or these different buildings crumbling? And they all have their own, like, there's one brick building that has these really minute detailed bits of like the bricks falling off. And then there are buildings where there's all the rebar sticking out. And it's quite morbid, honestly, but the movie is really, really interesting. Just like, how can we animate Tokyo's destruction in the most expressive way possible?
And using at a certain point, I remember they're kind of over a hill and they're specifically talking about certain landmark buildings that are representative of like the shields or whatever. And so it just kind of makes Tokyo feel very like an essential part of the story in a sense, the location itself. And I think they even talk about certain like subway lines are a source of like power connecting each of them or something like that. So it's cool the way they actually use the city within all of its like
I like the
power
idea
structure.
of this like huge, like dark fantasy, science fiction, apocalyptic horror action sequences taking place in like a modern cityscape like that. Like the few moments where you have like these, young characters, ranting about, their side in the Dragon of Heaven versus the Dragon of Earth fight, and, dressed in white or dressed in black and like shooting energy at each other. And there's a lot of fights like this. And just, I don't know, there was something cool about the fact that it was set across Tokyo skylines. And yeah, I could definitely see that Rintaro would be interested in that visually, because he does so much of it in the movie while speed running through things that, I don't know, maybe if he had taken more time on some of these characters, or maybe had turned this into like a series or something like that where it could follow the pace of the manga, maybe you'd get a little bit more out of, or even have, as Perry, you kind of alluded to the idea that in the manga it sounds like there's like downtime, or there's moments that aren't like this bleak apocalyptic hellscape, whereas really this entire thing does feel like we're introduced to this ancient war through these really grim psychic visions right off the beginning, and then he basically just gets dropped right into Tokyo. All of these characters in some way are trying to fight him, whether they're the evil ones trying to kidnap him, or whether the good ones trying to work with him or protect him in some capacity. And characters are kidnapped, and then other characters are shown really gruesome visions of the future, and then they fight over the future, and almost every character dies, I think.
Right? Everyone except for Kamui, and including, I guess, everyone who was in Tokyo, because at the end it's just a desert wasteland, and he's alone on Tokyo Tower, cradling the decapitated head of his best friend.
Awesome.
It is awesome.
Again, the movie's very monotone. It is just like misery all the time. But I do think with the kind of adolescent angst core, it works.
Yeah, no, totally. I find I got enough implied that there was enough to like grab onto when it came to the relationships and understanding everybody's dynamic. It's just that I think those hangout scenes that they could have had in between would have just helped when there was, a sacrifice made or a death that happened suddenly. And don't get me wrong, there's still those moments, like they have moments that are kind of within the battle. It's like, as the chaos is happening around them, they'll go through something where they're expressing a feeling they've never expressed before, or something like that.
I fucking loved the dude who his dying breath is talking about how he loves like beautiful women, and that he's so glad that he could die protecting a beautiful woman. I was like, absolute legend. So
King.
True, man.
A Romeo until the end, baby.
That was just a great character detail. I wish there was honestly like more like personality for some of them, because there were a couple that died and I legitimately kind of forgot their names, and I was like, I remembered that they were on the good side. So it sucks that they died for sure. But that was like a specific character where I was like, I very much understand. This guy had one personality trait.
He's kind of the only one who gets to have something close to a rounded character.
Although I felt really bad for the woman, because she's sitting there being like, damn, this guy died protecting me, and is just kind of cradling him and looking at him as he's as he's dying in her arms, and then she also just gets stabbed in the back while she's doing that, and I was like, damn, she didn't even get like a final fight or anything either.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that seems really
it's tough out there for all these characters.
It's tough out there, yeah.
Doesn't matter where you're fighting. You're fighting in a train station. It doesn't matter. You're destroying the entire place, and
it is kind of interesting to watch that character specifically, the one that stabs her. It's like the twin Kamui. What's his actual name? Fuma.
Yeah.
When he turns, it is interesting because he starts off as kind of like this big buff, kind of almost like leading man type, where he seems like he's going to be a protector, and then they turn him into the most ruthless character ever, where he's killing every single one of his friends and trying to kill his
he just
sister.
loves killing. That's actually like his personality for a bit.
Yeah,
like, damn, he just, it doesn't matter which side you're on, he just loves to kill people.
They even give him there's a couple in my notes I'll have to look through, but they even give him like one-liners before he kills somebody or after he kills somebody, and they make him all kind of sly and evil. It's cool. It's fun to watch, to be honest.
Even though the motivation is meant to be that like he is upset at the idea, like they that the idea that like Kamui is going to turn evil and he's going to kill their best friend Katari, who is their, the other childhood friend who is sort of kidnapped by the dragons of the earth, and like that's the vision he is shown. Like to be like, look, you need to do something. And then you constantly get these visions of like both of them holding swords and both of them having angel wings, and you do know that there's sort of the end game of this is that these two childhood friends are going to battle with each other, and as Perry already alluded to, one is going to decapitate the other one and not be stoked about having to do that.
I think something that helps explain the kind of, lightness to the screenplay is I was reading on the manga video DVD, there is like a gallery interview where it's like 23 pages where you just keep being next and you get to see this interview typed out with An America, where Rintaro has this thing where he says that he considers music to be more important than story. He says that a movie with a weak script can work if it has strong music, but a movie with a strong script cannot overcome having weak music, which I think explains why he's okay with just getting very gestural with the plot and be like, kind of go with it, because it must be said the soundtrack for this movie is amazing. Yasuaki Shimizu, who people might know from his album Kirin. It used to be a YouTube recommendations core. Like it's a red album with a cat on it. He does all sorts of great, weird saxophone records. And he's breaking out some scary saxophone sounds on the X soundtrack, and it's great. It's one of the soundtracks listened to the most.
Yeah, it's I totally agree. And also, speaking on the simplicity of it, I think somewhere in the wiki I was reading that it said that he was very focused on the fight scenes in particular, and he wanted the writing to be as simple as possible. So that makes sense about how kind of streamlined this feels, I suppose. And the fact that like a lot of these character moments that happen are usually in between or happening during the chaos of a battle, or even if it's a lot of the things that are revealed to are through these very surreal dreams as well. That's a big part of the movie when it's not a bunch of skyscrapers being absolutely destroyed. It's usually them being like kind of processing their emotions through dreams and through like weird symbols and imagery that way.
Doing like dream walking as like the princess kind of shows them, and the evil sister of the princess as well. Like it's kind of like both of them are pitching you on like these visions of the future and be like, you should act to prevent these things. And you're like, which one do I trust? Like which future is actually coming? And all of these characters are just literally killing each other over these visions, essentially.
Both of the rundowns of like what each princess thinks either Kamui or Fuma should do is presented as a direct address to the camera. So it really is just like, here's your exposition. Here's what we're all about. You get an audience. Okay, let's go.
Here's some devil bat wings and a magic sword being pulled out of a woman.
Yeah. Which is an amazing image. It's such a good image that they use it like 3 times in the movie.
Well, they use it in the opening where they're showing Kamui, like I think it's like his mother who is like sort of like naked and like giving birth to this sword, and which is what he's viewing. And then later on, it's actually the childhood friend who Fuma ends up killing by pulling the sword out of her. And I actually kind of knew it was coming because they set it up a bit with the idea of like she keeps saying that there's like something inside of her, and she's like she doesn't know what it is. And it's kind of implied that she's giving birth to something and you're not sure what. And by the time he reached it like into her, I was sitting there going, I remember the imagery of how this movie opened, and bam, like just gruesomely like yanks a sword out of her and goes, now I'm gonna kill you with the sword. And I was sitting there at that point going, that's a pretty fast transition from like being shown a vision of like your best friend being evil and like killing your childhood friend together to being the one who actually yanks a sword out of the childhood friend and in turn killing her. And I was like, damn, you just like literally did the thing you were trying to prevent when you turned evil. But I guess that's just how far gone he's supposed to be at that point.
That's Fuma's sister too.
Right.
Oh, come on, dude.
Killing his sister.
Dude.
Yeah. Another Baroque misery.
A lot of melodrama here.
Yeah.
and lots of sisters, because then it's like the two princess sisters, you know, are one's holding the other one while the other one's dying. And I do love that the one of the Earth is literally berating her sister about how bad she is about predicting visions and futures, like while she's dying. I was like, that's pretty petty. But then at the same time, she brings up a whole like side thing that's not addressed of like her being held by like the government and possibly being like used as like a tool for predicting futures and stuff like that, which I was like, I don't know if that's something that's like addressed more in the manga or not, or if that was, I was like, we didn't really see any of the government, the rest of the city of Tokyo and the rest of this. So I was like, damn, they're keeping her hostage and using her like the, I don't know, like the Mentats and like Minority Report or whatever.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, they do have that scene where it's just because it reminded me of the Minority Report as soon as I saw it, where that girl is in the giant computer. And
that's not even getting into the supercomputer who like has had a relationship with the girl who's in the chair since she was like a child.
Yeah,
like, that's weird. And is in love with her.
There's so many, each character truly does feel like they have an entire movie on their own. Like there's so much interesting stuff that they just kind of go like, this is a part of them, and then they die, or you know, we get to know them maybe a little bit more before they're just kind of thrown to the side because we need to focus on Kamui.
Now let's see an energy blast destroy a landmark in Tokyo.
Yeah, hell yes. Just a couple red dragons destroying Tokyo. It is badass. Like anytime the action parts pop up, you are truly like, I don't know really what I'm going to see next. Like
it's pretty gorgeously animated too by Rintaro, and I think at Madhouse was who was doing the animation and who like the studio he made it at, which it's worth noting actually connection. Yoshiaki Kawajiri, I believe, was the head of Madhouse at that time, and so that's the Wicked City director and also Vampire Hunter Deep Bloodlust. So actually that's why Vampire Hunter and this actually share a cinematographer. So it's very, very beautiful animation.
Kawajiri worked on this. I saw him in the credits last night.
Let's go.
But yeah, I mean, the animation is just gorgeous. It's so fluid. The way they play with different like intensities of light is so impressive. There's a lot of strobing, which you gotta love. There's all these plays of kind of red lightning and these green dragons. And I feel like every minute there's a shot that has these really intricately animated falling or swaying petals. And there's all these ripples and reflections. And it's just technically a very, very impressive movie.
It's also one of those, and this pops up a lot in anime, I suppose, but I am starting to really... maybe just get used to it because we've been talking about anime for the last few weeks. But I love the whole, like the different powers aspect, that every single person has a very different power seemingly. And there's always this interesting kind of chess game that has to be played of like how you overcome whatever specialty they have. Whether it be
one's like shooting water at a character at one point, and so the fire character, in order to like fight back, like ignites a train at the train station that's coming towards her, and then the train literally runs her over, and that's when we see her protective shield die because she was the one protecting the entire train station, preventing collateral damage. And then they just start going fucking nuts, and there's a guy with like ribbons punching a hole in like dudes' chests, and there's like another dude summoning like a blood red like pentagram and stuff. Like there's some pretty incredible imagery just in terms of individual character powers going head to head.
Yeah. There's the wonderful introduction of the guy who can make it like rain blades, basically, or make the rain sharp. That's a fantastic first shot of just the sky with all the sort of silver daggers falling down.
Yeah, and it's this that kind of like introduction to a threat coming, and there's so many different variations specifically with that character, because I think that's the water character where he does the sharp rain. He does like a disc, like a sharp disc that he throws that's made of water that cuts through trees and buildings and stuff. He does this little cool like whirlpool within his hand that he can expand and decrease in size. And then he does a tidal wave over a rooftop and stuff, which leads to just these kind of surreal images that even when they're in the real world, it feels dreamlike sometimes. just because.
Oh yeah, every once in a while they'll just be like, "Wait, are we now fighting an underground cable monster that has like its wiring from the supercomputer that's rising?" She's like, "Okay, let me whip out my sword and just like slicing it like I'm fighting like I don't know, like Medusa or something like that, or like a Hydra
or something."
Yeah, Hydra or something like that as well. Like it's just like these set pieces like bleed into each other very fluidly in that way, in a way that does feel quite surreal and overwhelming as it's going on, because you're just like, it is one after the other, and every set piece is like the big climactic one where like a character you care about like sacrifices themselves or like dies, or something like that happens, and it happens so much that I mean I agree with Perry's point from earlier that it does. There's a part of me that it got like a little monotonous, and I don't know if I'm necessarily saying that as like a bad thing or a good thing, because I do feel like maybe it limits some of the dramatic highs to be just in such a high register from front to back. But at the same time, I imagine part of that exhausting nature of it is kind of like what he liked about it and what he was trying to convey, that this is such an overwhelmingly bleak thing, like, or at least that's what he was trying to turn it into. But it sounds like,
and I think there's something to be said that I think it almost every time, if not every time, like we've been saying, there's these characters need to basically sacrifice themselves in order to destroy the thing that they're fighting. Like it's on that level of power where it doesn't feel like it feels truly apocalyptic in all directions, because it's just like no matter who they're up against, someone has to die in order to sacrifice them. Like the one guy takes the fabric dude that keeps like using all his like
Fabric Dude is a great name. There's also Goon with Whips is in my notes somewhere.
Hell yeah. And he like just grabs him and basically commits suicide, does like a nosedive into the concrete to kill him and kill himself as well. And it just, that's a good way of doing it. It feels very just like it accents the power that all of these guys have and what it requires.
But yeah, the teen girl's dog gets involved in a fight.
That's awesome.
There's red lightning strikes like all over Tokyo, turning it into the sort of apocalyptic hellscape they all envisioned at a certain point. And it does end up obviously in a big climactic fight. After you get the one at the train station, you get the one at the mall, you get the one in the city, you get all these various ones they're getting into. And then Fuma and Kamui have their sort of like final destined fight where they do kind of talk about the kind of cruel irony that these childhood friends who are, sort of both trying to do the same thing, like trying to prevent these future visions, these opposing future visions that they've been shown, and how both of them are basically just, kind of coming true. Like ultimately the sister does die. Ultimately Tokyo is like completely fucking destroyed. And neither of them accomplished the things that they were trying to. They both just, end up morally compromising each other, I guess you could say, because Fuma goes obviously full killing machine evil, and Kamui ends up having to kill him, which even though he's seen the level of destruction he's capable of, doesn't feel good to him. It's not something he's proud or happy to have done.
Yeah, they give it the Devilman ending. They give it we're going to wipe the board of everyone except the two main players, and it's going to be so sad. You're going to feel so bad for the one who survives. Which always works on me. It always works on me. When they play the music at the end, they play like the melancholy pop music, and it shows the photos of his kids. I feel sad.
I did think that gesture was I was not expecting the full like photo album. Like these guys were childhood friends. Like in the moment of him like holding his body, I was like, oh damn,
it is pretty wild. Yeah. And by the end too, I was mentioning how they had the shield, so there's no civilians being shown or anything. This does start before they show the like desolate Tokyo. They are starting to show people just getting completely crushed by all of these battles in pretty horrific ways. So it gets pretty wild by that point.
Yeah, there's a lot of bleakness. There's a lot of suffering for this Kamui. For a while there, I thought he was being given like a Jesus arc or something. He was the chosen one, and I was like, is he going to die and sacrifice himself? Turns out he's the only person that lives and literally everything else dies. So I was like, dude, it's like the opposite of a Jesus story. It's just pretty crazy.
Destined to live in sadness and alone. Yep.
Yeah, but definitely, fate and mortality and apocalyptic anxiety are all on its mind, and it made for it like I see the emotion emotional melodrama connection to the story of The Crow, of like a character who is also going through like that immense amount of suffering and despair, and it being turned into this sort of like fantastical action story in kind of a way that's being done here.
And he gets no rest by the end here. No going to heaven back to your girlfriend. He just gets to live in desolate Tokyo on top of this tower. I don't know what happens
literally
next. But
all of his childhood friends dies. Every single person he meets and maybe comes to like or comes to dislike, it doesn't matter. They all die in these fighting in these apocalyptic scenarios. And it's a very interesting way of doing an adaptation of a manga that, you know, still doesn't have any sort of resolution. So I can see why he would be like, I need to come up with a resolution, because it doesn't have one. And at the same time, I can see why maybe like purists who love the material are like, dude, he just like did a speed run through all those characters and was like, what if I turn this into like a misery apocalypse action porn kind of experience instead? And I don't know, I can see why that would upset people, but as someone who hasn't read the manga, there was stuff about that I liked in this movie. So
the core of the manga is still this kind of like star-crossed best friends, torn apart by war thread in it. So it already has that sort of melancholy at its heart and this tragedy at its heart. So it's not a totally out of line route to take it.
Yeah. Well, if we're pivoting towards a reductive rating round, though, on this one for X the movie, I thought this was solid. This landed in kind of like the 3 territory for me. But talking about it, I'm interested in going back to this at some point, because I did feel personally just a little bit disoriented and overwhelmed as I was watching it. And I think partially that was probably because I was watching the dub, and now I kind of wonder if I should go back and watch the sub and just enjoy the surreal, I don't know what the fuck is going on, rather than the speed run of here's this character, here's this character, here's this character, here's all of the, you know, take all this exposition and, you know, do all this. And it sounds like the movie still has that anyway, and that's part of the sort of pace and tone that he struck when he was adapting it. But it sounds like also the dub was designed for, you have no familiarity with any of this, and so we're going to try to spoon feed you some of it. And I think maybe not having that and being able to just like completely give myself over to the fact that this is designed to be a hallucinatory nightmare apocalypse experience, incredibly bleak, and everything that's maybe exaggerated about it is meant to be sort of emotionally expressive in that way, and that you are experiencing these dueling visions and dreams that these characters are then putting into action. And being introduced to all of these characters in gorgeously animated environments and character designs and incredible music, and just watching them go through these apocalyptic, powerful battle sequences where all you do is spend 90 minutes being like, oh no, the entire city is being destroyed, and oh no, every character is dying and a best friend is holding them while they're dying. Like, that's what is happening throughout the entire movie. And I do think that overall, even if I didn't fully, I did feel like I was being kind of thrown into a finale without the, you know, proper context to maybe completely get involved in the character work. I do think that some of that emotional gravity might work better for me knowing the full shape of what this is and how it is that he is adapting this manga, because I do think Rintaro is obviously incredibly good at what he's doing. So yeah, solid 3 for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's a pretty strong 3 for me. I just agree with you overall that it feels like I'm getting thrown into something I'm not quite familiar with, and they're not taking the time purposely to really let you know about certain character history and how they connect with each other and things like that. There's still enough implication throughout their dialogue and their small moments they get in between all of the battle and chaos. But and you know, you can get on board with certain things. It's just I don't think that there's enough quite there for when they start doing all of these sacrifices for you to really feel the heaviness of it. You can watch it and I still feel like, wow, that's heavy on its surface. I just don't really feel it throughout, like losing a character, I suppose, in this time, because
I just feel it with the supporting characters, because by the time you get to the end and it's the 2 friends and it's a friend decapitating another friend, you know enough about those ones to I think really, really get that.
And for it to have been
Yeah, and for it to have been expressively realized in the idea of like, here's the city falling apart, here's a fucking dragon going through modern Tokyo, here's a person pulling a sword of another person to kill his best friend, like all that imagery has a lot of weight to it. But yeah, when it's just like some random crew member who like the last scene is like, hey, I'm so and so and I do this, and then
yeah, and then they're just murked 20 minutes later,
then they're hit by a train, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's so and so.
He was cool. Yeah, like that was sick for a little while. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot happening. I think that's the thing, but that's also what is so fun about it, is that it's like for 90 minutes, I mean, there is certainly a lot happening, and them mixing all these great battles and great animation and really cool surreal dream worlds that eventually mix into the reality a little bit is really awesome. And it not having an official ending kind of does end up working with him deciding to do just like a complete apocalypse where he's just kind of left in the aftermath and there's no real good outcome to either one of these things that were going to happen, whether it be the dragon of the earth or dragon of the heavens. So I definitely think just with what he was given, the source material, I think he made a cool decision. So yeah, I really like this. And I do want to go back to it, just see if maybe I can get rid of some of those things that are hangups for me now that I know just how fast this is going to come at me. But it's still a lot of fun and gorgeous. I
also want to check out Metropolis now. It looks sick.
Yeah, I need to check out more Rintaro for sure.
He's great. And I'll also say that Kawajiri went on to do an XTV series at Madhouse in the early 2000s.
Whoa.
That is much closer to the manga, and then has its own ending, which is a bit more Jesus-like for Kamui.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm
terrible at watching TV, but I like what I've seen of it.
Yeah, I'm bad at watching TV too. That's why I've got this show.
Hey, only 24 episodes. That is very watchable.
30 minutes piece.
Doable. I might have to check that out. Yeah, but for you, Perry, what's the rating?
I feel like probably a 3, but maybe a higher 3.
No, you gotta like it a little bit more.
Well, see, I like it a lot, so I guess it's a 4.
We're gonna talk him into it.
Well, I mean, I guess by the ratings of if what you two said are 3s, then I will give it a 4.
Okay.
I'll give it a 4. I liked it more than you two, I think.
Do you have the same hangups?
I do, but they don't bother me as much.
Gotcha.
I think it's an incredibly flawed product, but I also think it's very effective. It through the sort of blunt force approach to dramatics, it gets to a real kind of teen angst misery feeling by the end, and I think it fits the comic well.
Yeah, well, and speaking of teen angst misery, I am incredibly excited to say that that is going to wrap it up here for X, the movie from 1996. But we're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about even more of that in James O'Barr's The Crow from 1998. So stick around. All right, we are back, and we are talking James O'Barr's The Crow, the 1998 no-budget action revenge horror movie, written, directed, edited by and starring David Ullman alongside his directing partner Matt Jackson, and of course unofficially adapting James O'Barr's gothic supernatural superhero comic book about Eric Draven, the grief-stricken undead superhero who witnesses his fiance's murder right in front of his eyes, ends up shot in the head, and is resurrected by a black crow, and with a black leather Joker-fied appearance so that he can get violent revenge against the men who ruined his life. the first thing I guess we should probably address here is that this comes 4 years after the official and very expensive Hollywood studio adaptation of The Crow in 1994, which we have covered on the show, actually, with friend of the pod, Brandon Lim. That movie was obviously directed by the 90s music video director Alex Proyas and starred the late Brandon Lee, who was famously, or I guess infamously, accidentally killed during the making of the movie when the point blank sort of like execution stunt went wrong. We talked about this when we were covering the movie, which we really dug, honestly. But, you know, we kind of viewed it honestly as like a really, at least in movie form, it was like this really dark variation on like the youth rebel, like sort of like angst melodrama that it was like one of those movies, but if it had like an all-timer like goth rock soundtrack, including like 9 Inch Nails and The Cure, and it had like grisly John Woo inspired like church shootouts and stuff like that.
And then that like teenage angst that he's always, you know, the way he speaks, the kind of the dark poetry that he's reciting as he's doing all of these violent acts and all of that.
Yeah. And also funneled through like a pretty silly like superhero take on like a death wish, like revenge fantasy kind of thing too, right? And just one that had just like this really strong sense of style to it. And Proyas in particular like really leans into like gleefully the like tonal whiplash between like here's like this really sentimental brooding that this character is doing, and then here's these very humorously exaggerated kind of like goons, especially the long-haired like sword-wielding Dracula attired landlord played by Michael Wincott in the 94 version, and then also doing these kind of ridiculous sort of sadistic sort of like slasher action set pieces as well, where the hero is brutally stabbing and impaling and fucking exploding people left and right, and you know, funneling all of that through that like Hot Topic emo mood and like sort of like grungy horror noir industrial music video kind of look to it all. But
it's never daytime.
The reason we bring that up,
raining, metal everywhere.
Exactly. The reason we bring that up is because the two central creatives here for this film, David Ullman and Matt Jackson, it sounds like they were 14 years old in 1994 when that movie comes out. They went to go see it on opening weekend. They were incredibly stoked about it. They weren't familiar with the comic book. They fell in love with the movie. And if you watch the sort of documentary about the making of the fan film, they talk a lot about the fact that like they really loved this movie, and it sounded like it inspired them to go and buy the soundtrack and get into that sense of mood. It inspired them to go and pick up the graphic novel and actually read it and discover that there was tons of stuff, like there were changes made to it, and you know, there was stuff, and it sounded like what they were originally wanted to shoot was like extra scenes to like put into the Brandon Lee version to be like, here's how it would even be more like accurate if they didn't like skip these scenes and stuff like that. And then they realized kind of partway through that no, they're going to take this quite seriously, and they were like, this isn't just a high school friend like fan film, like we are going to spend years and we're going to do the whole thing ourselves, but obviously not working with anywhere near the same resources as someone like an Alex Proyas in terms of cameras, in terms of lighting, production design, miniatures, you know, special effects, whatever. This is a completely shot on video, do it yourself guerrilla affair made by high school friends and classmates who were, as they put it, trying to make the most faithful screen adaptation of James O'Barr's Gothic masterpiece. And I think the place I want to start with is Perry, is that an accurate statement that they made? Because you were telling me that you read both of these, the manga that we were talking about and the comic we're talking about. So how did they make the most faithful adaptation of James O'Barr's The Crow?
Yes, more or less.
Okay.
The narration's there. I mean, even the different issues have different, like, show up as chapter titles in this movie, so there'll be ear titles.
Okay, so that's what that is.
Death, they use the panels as storyboards. There's a great bit in
that you could kind of tell, honestly, just watching it, because it's quite beautifully framed and quite like gorgeous to like, despite the fact that they are shooting this on like literally a shot on video budget. They're making the sets in their fucking mom's basement. All of the roles, even for like adult drug dealers who rape and murder people, are played by like your bozo 15-year-old buddy. Which is kind of amusing every time it happens, but it, like, you know, the limitations of of this production wise are incredibly apparent watching the entire thing, until you go, but that framing is really well done, or like that bit of lighting is really well done, or that piece of editing is really, and you're kind of like, they're getting this from somewhere. They are using the imagery, the panels, they're using the mood and the pacing that they're drawing from the material, and you can really tell.
But not all of it. There are some images that are original to the film, and there are some images that are then remixing images from Proyas's film. For example, there's the pawn shop scene where Eric shows up and sort of looks through the glass of the pawn shop. In the comic, that shot doesn't happen, but that is a shot in the Proyas movie. So they're kind of ribbed on that. It's framed in the exact same way in the Proyas movie too. The biggest differences are in the comic, the Crow talks to him. In the film, it's Matt Jackson, the co-director, dressed as like a scary guy.
Skull Cowboy.
As the Skull Cowboy, yeah. And the Skull Cowboy shows up a bit in the comic, but he doesn't talk to him in the same way. And then the comic ends with this huge shootout, which they just didn't get the resources for the film.
Yeah. They did you hear them explain why? It's a very funny story.
Yeah, they put out, they made flyers saying, "Hey everyone, come to this shoot, and you can be in the finale of our movie," and no one showed up. They literally said that they like handed out flyers. They had a bunch of people in person who were like on the football team that like he played with and stuff like that, and they all said they were going to show up. And like, I don't know if everyone was just doing like a bullying bit. They're like, "Oh yeah, totally, dude, we'll come." And then they said literally one person showed up for like the big massacre scene where they needed like 35 extras to like be in this scene where he just goes on like a fucking massacre. And then they literally scrapped the scene because they couldn't do it. And apparently also that was the moment where they said, we are actually not going to finish even shooting this, because they shot it originally in like late 1994 into 1995. They shot for, I think they said like 4 or 5 months or so, and that was the moment where they quit. They temporarily quit for like 2 or 3 months because they were so sad that all their friends flaked on them, and I felt so bad watching it.
Yeah, it's brutal. Like, and it is cool though when they're talking about it in the documentary of how eventually they stopped the hiatus because David Ullman in particular started to feel like he started to, he was studying film and he felt more confident in certain things that they could change and even reshoot, which I know for, I think, Matt, his partner was kind of like, "Oh, do I even want to do this?" Yeah, like it's like, dude, this is exhausting us for seemingly no reason other than, I guess,
so it's definitely
expression.
More David Ullman's passion project than his buddy, but his buddy was very into it. It sounds like for the first like year or so that they were making it, where they were having a lot of fun making it, and then it became a little bit more of like a serious thing that they were having less fun making. But it sounds like also all those reshoots ended up being like David Ullman being a little bit more of a perfectionist, and probably why it ended up also, kind of frequently looking and playing as well as it does. Like, this is like, despite the fact that we're talking about a fan film made by 14-year-olds from between 1994 and 1998, this is like surprisingly effective. Like, it's actually impressive.
It's a good movie. It's just a good movie, it's definitely the best movie I've ever seen made by teenagers. Probably by a country mile, honestly. And something that I think adds to the power of it, or I guess makes it work as well as it does, is the comic of The Crow is very earnest. It is it takes itself very seriously. It doesn't have the same sort of self-awareness that the Proyas movie has. Because funneled through a 14-year-old boy who's going through his emo phase is probably the most like authentic and natural way. Exactly, because The Crow is kind of it's a painful comic to read, because it's the author's working through the death of his fiance and he's attempting to get catharsis during this comic, and rather infamously it did not work for him. Writing the comic only made him angrier, and it's honestly a very unpleasant comic a lot of the times. But
you can definitely tell that in this version of it too. Like, there's more scenes of like Eric in a room weeping in despair and then like, you know, committing self-harm, or, you know, like there's a lot more of those scenes in this rather than the really cool ones of like, you know, Brandon Lee being an action star drenched in leather, just, you know, like that's like those scenes are in here as well, because you can tell they like that movie and they liked that rendition, especially because David Ullman dresses himself exactly like more like Brandon Lee than even the drawing in the in the comic, based on what I could see. So he really liked the Brandon Lee read of the character. But I do agree with you that like Proyas's version is like the cool version. It's less embarrassing in terms of like, we're not I don't think the audience is going to put up with like 10 scenes of this guy just like crying in his room having flashbacks to his fiance, even though it sounds like that's more accurate to the material.
About I'd say a third of the comic is Eric in that like garret apartment crying, and then like the entire lyrics of a Cure song are written out next to it.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Honestly.
It's great. And I think it's like the best goth comic. It really is just, it gets it so well. Because there's this really open, genuine, raw nerve. And here it's being filtered, a very mature grief is being filtered through a sort of 14-year-old emo sensibility, and it's also very genuine. And I think they link up in interesting ways. And I love David Ullman's performance. It's genuinely one of my favorite superhero movie performances, because I think theater kid Eric Draven is just like the perfect way to play it. He's so intense. He has that snarl. He has sort of the way he growls out all the kind of noirish narration starting each chapter. He's relishing doing all the bits where he's reciting Hamlet, or he's reciting Emily Dickinson, or all these things that are like kind of silly. He just takes it so seriously. And he's clear like, I'm going to do a fucking kick-ass performance on this. And it's just so charming.
Yeah, there's a very consistent tone and style in general with his direction, which I think is really impressive. Like, given the whole world he builds with the constant rain, the black and white, just all these like wet alleyways and stuff that they work with. But I do think his sincerity when he's doing all of this dark poetry into the violence is awesome. It's something I've liked about the Crow's character in general, I guess, is that it can come off kind of, you know, like silly and a little bit like almost too angsty to the point that it might be laughable, but then he dishes out the violence, and it's like the fear just comes right back into you. You know what I mean? Like, he might be reciting those things, but when he's taking 10 bullets to the chest and he's continually trying to kill you, it turns into this terrifying moment, actually, instead of just this like kind of funny angst or whatever. And
because the violence is upsetting and like traumatizing. Like even though he's invincible, it is like this thing where they really want to show you the idea that he is experiencing suffering. There's a great monologue that he delivers, which I'm assuming is ripped straight from the comic, and it's well delivered by Ullman here. But he talks about the idea of like tears of God fell like rain upon the garden of pain, and it's like very flowery, like literally the idea of like, you know, bleak petals to bathe in the trauma. But he ends that entire monologue that he gets about being like, I let the physical pain match my soul's torment, suck in the bullets like cigarette smoke.
It's so tight. It's so tight.
Like, not only is it a sick line, but it very much describes like what it is, like what the external expression of the internal feelings is here. Like, he is legitimately going through all of these violent altercations where he's getting this revenge, but he's also, you know, it's also a form of self-harm for this character. It's a reflection of how he's feeling on the inside to just absorb these, you know, very gruesome and bloody scenarios he puts himself in.
Yeah, because the scenes of violence against him that linger the longest are the self-harm scenes, which one of them is kind of memorably done with the Martin blood razor effect.
I was kind of trying to figure out how he was doing it, honestly. I was like, I hope this kid isn't cutting himself.
No, I'm fairly
it
certain.
It entered my mind.
It's
you did talk about method acting.
I'm first referring to the technique from the Tom Savini Makeup Effects book, where he talks about how he does the blood in Martin for the throat slits. Where this, like I did when I made a student film too, where you sand down a knife until it's totally dulled, and then you put like chocolate syrup on it, on the blade, and so you just drag it across your arm, and it leaves a little trail of blood.
And then in black and white, it looks very convincing.
Exactly, yeah. So that's in the black and white scenes in Martin. that's what they're doing.
Okay, yeah. What I find interesting too is that like this story itself, The Crow, has the kind of perfect blend between something that is just almost like a teenage angst that has like some juvenile ideas, but then there's this very adult, violent world that it lives in, and so for teenagers to try to capture it, I think it makes almost more sense. I in the documentary they were talking about how they would make films beforehand, but they didn't think about them as hard, and they also were trying to do things that they felt were kind of beyond their years, like playing a detective or something like that when they were 14. And with this, it's interesting because they're still playing something that's beyond their years in a way, like it's like drug dealing and all of these like inner city problems and stuff. But
some of their bozo friends wearing like the sunglasses and like with like a cigar in their mouth or something like that. Those are the scenes that are just adorable. You know,
yeah. And that's definitely like almost the inescapable juvenile quality of the film. But I do like that there's this.
It's a movie literally made by like 14 and 15-year-olds in like Ohio. You know, like trying to be like, we're gangsters in Detroit making a superhero movie, and like that limitation is always apparent to you. I think the entire time you're watching with it. You're watching it, but it is a million% always more charming than it is harmful to like what it is that they're doing. And I think in huge part because they're just incredibly ambitious behind the camera while they're doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having that, like their kind of belief in some of that legitimate angst, especially at that age, not being as probably self-aware of what they're doing, I think really helps like them give like,
absolutely,
especially Ullman giving that sincere performance in the lead. I think is great. And then that you can tell that they're having a lot of fun too, when it gets to the parts where they get to be the evil psychopaths and they're doing heroin or whatever, you know, it's kind of interesting to watch a bunch of 15, 16-year-olds be like, oh, I get to go to the dark side of life, something I don't get to, you know, dabble in or whatever.
Yeah. There's a scene where Eric's fighting what looks like a gang of little brothers. Like they look even for the cast of crew, just like extremely young. Just like no, these are little brothers that are wielding guns, and Eric's blowing them away. And I do think the intensity of the performance is helped by just how the rest of the cast are just like they're fucking around. There's a bit in the documentary where he talks about how he got frustrated that no one else really taken it seriously, and it kind of adds to the feeling of like, oh, Eric is some supernatural being. If he's the only person who's acting, like capital A acting in the whole movie.
Yeah.
He's so funny when in the documentary when he was just like, yeah, so I read a book on method acting.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm gonna like, yeah, I'm gonna give that a go. And then he was like, yeah, kind of made everybody really angry at me.
Yeah. He did say too, which is interesting. It's like that he didn't necessarily do it as a ton on set, like when he was off the thing. It actually applied more to his real life, which became a problem.
Yeah, it was probably like his parents who were pissed off. They were like, dude, you're not fucking the Crow, man. Like, fucking go to school.
Take the makeup off and go to math class.
There's a kind of uncomfortable scene in the documentary because something else about the sort of no budget ingenuity is almost every interior is the basement of David Ullman's family's house.
Which actually you would not know watching the movie, I don't think.
They do a good
there's
job
a lot of
it.
sets.
And they also talk in the documentary about how it was like they made the set decorations through wood he found in the attic.
Yeah.
Like it is such a DIY movie, but there's a kind of tense bit in the documentary where he talks about how his dad got mad at him for using the basement too much. And there's footage of them like setting up a shot or something. And then the dad comes downstairs like, what are you guys doing? What's going on here? And it's like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is our set for the next 4 years, man. Like, I don't know.
And it does, I think that moments like that when you see it are kind of like telling about just how this process would be. It's like, you know, Alex Proyas obviously would have an entire different set of hurdles with the industry itself, but just like something trying to make your film here, you're trying to express yourself, you have no money, you have no place to actually shoot it, and now the only thing stopping you is your dad just like, hey, I want to use the basement, what the fuck are you doing? It's like even that itself is kind of just a cool thing to think about while someone is making a film. It's just such a different thing to have to overcome, I suppose.
And there's a great bit of low budget ingenuity for the only real special effects sequence in the movie. I mean, there are little bits where they have guns going off and blood hits and stuff, but
they also get a lot out of that fucking crow. Like an impressive amount out of the crow.
Oh, yeah. But there's a bit where Eric, when he's going for final battle, he burns his house down, or he burns the lair he's been in down. And the way they did that is they learned that there was a real abandoned house that the local fire department in this Ohio town was going to use as like a test. So they were going to light the house on fire and have the firemen go in. And they're like, well, we got to be there. And we have to have exterior shots of this house burning. And we got to have exterior shots to establish that, hey, this is where he's staying. So later on in the movie, when they burn it down, it'll be like, oh, wow, how'd they get that shot?
Yeah, dude, they even got the fire department guys to like briefly be actors as if they were, you know, like the emergency guys pulling up with like the cop to be like, dude, what's happening? Where are all these murders and like fires happening?
Yeah. And I remember that genuine feeling of seeing him, the Ullman as the character, Eric, standing in front of this burning house and going like, how the fuck did they pull that off? Were they just like, they're just driving around until they stop burning house. And they're like, go, get out, get the cameras. Like, so that was a really cool moment just to feel like, to know the history of how this was made in some way, or at least the circumstances under it was made, and just see something like that and be kind of astonished by it, because it's like, that's such a big budget kind of shot, and we know that these guys are doing it for literally nothing. The same thing applies when they start doing some of their own stunts, like I mean, there's the shooting sequences, which are all awesome, by the way. But there's the buried alive stunt that starts the film where he comes out of the ground.
It's good.
And Ullman like actually buried himself alive, very, you know, thinly layered by the mud or whatever, but it's still
they gave him like
risk.
a little straw, like the same kind of way you do the stunt as like a, you know, like if you were an actual stuntman. But that's just that they're not, though. Like that's what's kind of scary about it, is I was like, these are like two 14-year-olds who are like, the other one's holding the camera, and it's like, I'll put a straw in there sometimes, hopefully he doesn't die.
There's a great quote about the straw, which I'm going to read. We dug a big hole, Jackson says, but not quite big enough for him to lay in without crunching himself up in some sort of ball. Then we actually buried him in the dirt with sort of a mock half coffin lid over top of him. He did have a snorkel at some point so he could breathe a little bit of air, which I would plug up from time to time to piss him off.
So they're still doing teenage shit, which is hilarious. And it's also, though, like, let me tell you, if I have to be buried alive for some type of art piece and the only thing I have is a snorkel and my friend starts plugging it up, we're going to have a problem when I get out of that dirt, let me tell you. And oh my God, that's terrifying.
That opening sequence for Buried Alive really establishes something that makes movies work so well is the visuals and the atmosphere are on point. This is a really cold-looking movie. It's always raining. It's shot on video and then converted to black and white, I believe, and it looks really harsh. And it's low light.
It does. It has that very like stark, like expressionist horror kind of black and white, and, you know, kind of look to it, despite being obviously also shot on video. So obviously having that very like lo-fi, grungy, you know, not a lot of detail to it. But because of the compositions that they're stealing from the panels, and because it's like, you know, such specific objects, you know, in the frame, in an environment, usually lit in this very harsh directional way, it kind of lends itself to those style choices still showing even in this low detail format like this. So like, you know, you get the broad mood and atmosphere of almost every shot, and, you know, using someone who's obviously really thought about these compositions as like your storyboard, like that's just a fantastic jumping off point for them, because this consistently looks fantastic. Like we talk about shot on video horror a number of times on this show, but obviously like something I returned to a lot while watching this was Twisted Issues, because that was also something that was shot on video, also made with like frequently like a bunch of high school and sort of like college friends who were just like ripping around town and creating these like, you know, low, like micro budget sort of like surreal gory sequences and stuff like that. And I was like, if that filmmaking mode was applied, but they had like the storyboard of like The Crow as it, like that's what this is like, almost a perfect merging of. And it really does like look and feel like exactly like how I imagine the comic is supposed to feel.
Yeah. I mean, the comic is, you know, pen and ink, black and white, really harsh, very contrasty, which the movie isn't just by nature of how it's recorded. But the rest of it, I mean, it looks the part. And again, it looks so cold. And the stuff that's unique to the camcorder, like the low light noise, the way water droplets get on the camera, the light streaks, they just look so good. There's that amazing scene where there's a big overhead light that's swinging while Eric's shooting people.
I love that moment. Yeah, like the interrogation lamp as he's sitting on the table. Like, it's so good. I wrote that one down too.
Yeah, then some of the exteriors, I mean, they look like they could be like dungeon synth or black metal tapes or something.
Yeah, I mean, I even liked a scene as simple as like the two criminals waiting by the railroad chatting in the car, and just having that choice of like the actual train going by them on like the right side of the frame while we see the car on the left, then cutting into, sort of like the two shot of both of them through the sort of driver's side window, but there's like a barrel fire sort of like lighting up their faces, and then cut to behind their heads through the rain covered windshield as you get just the two silhouetted heads in the car, setting up the fact that these guys are being preyed upon in some capacity, or we are kind of looking in on them. And then all of a sudden, bam, he appears in the backseat of the car, shoots the one in the passenger seat in the back of the head. Just chunky, black blood just fucking hits the windshield on the one side, and then he gets into his scene. And I was like, I'm assuming some of those frames are stolen from the comic book, but like they're still well realized and well cut together in a really effective way by that is shot and cut together by 14-year-olds. Yeah, and I'm like, that's fucking crazy to me. It's amazing.
That's the thing. It does a lot of with these like low budget shot on video films. You have a lot of the editing where you kind of see that extra space that they probably should have cut out, that extra second or half a second. I really feel like you don't, a lot of the time anyway, have that feeling where they cut it in any way that feels rhythmically strange or kind of like just kind of taking you out of the rhythm of the scene. It feels very well put
they have
together.
Good instincts. Yeah, all of that.
This movie's cut so well. The way they work in the flashbacks, which all the flashbacks are in color, by the way.
Yes.
And there are bits of these like almost strobe flash sequences, which is nothing like how the flashbacks treated in the comic. So you just have like him in the room, and then there'll be these flashes of color in between the black and white, and then for maybe half a second, you see like 3 images in color, and then back to the black and white, shot goes on.
Yeah, I like the one where the skull cowboy friend is like smacking him upside the head, and every time he smacks him, it literally like sends a memory flash like into the actual, like into our eyes as well. And he's like, I don't want to go there and all that. And then sometimes the actual, what's meant to be the, I will say, endearingly sentimental, like full color, I'm hanging out with the girl. There's a bit where she's like reading him straight up like Cat in the Hat. Yeah, which I just thought is like very, it's like adorable. And then every once in a while those moments will be interrupted by these actual like surreal, dreamlike sort of like, all of a sudden he'll get like the close-up of like the cocked gun that was used to kill her, like infects the memory through the editing, and then it'll cut to him like looking at himself through the broken mirror covered in rain and mud, and it'll go back to a flashback, and it'll be a close-up of like her eye widening before she's killed, and like just choices like that are just really effective.
And that's not in the comic. I mean, that's not how they do in the comic. In the comic, they're in discrete blocks usually, or there'll be some bits where it might be jumping back and forth, but again, a comic book can kind of get that sort of intense visual rhythm, but it's not the same as the rapid fire montage this movie gets.
Does the comic do that surreal vision bit of the horses running alongside the trains?
Yes, it does.
And then being killed by the crow, and it's like the afterlife imagery? Okay, because that was one I was particularly impressed by, like the editing of. I was like, that's a really cool
There's
moment.
Another bit in the comic when he actually is going to go in, he does the Emily Dickinson, because I would not stop for death, and he's kicking the beer bottles off the bar. It intercuts with images of a church, and because they're not filming a church, instead they use what I think is the Franco Zeffirelli Christ movie that they cut in clips from.
Oh, yeah. For the Jesus imagery.
Yeah. I also want to say, to go back to the car scene, that is kind of readapted from a bit at the end of the comic. They throw it out at the start of the movie. And I only bring up that comics accuracy stuff because they're sort of freestyling with some of the imagery there. In the comic, he busts in through the windshield, and because they couldn't do that, they then change how the assassination bit works and what the gore gag is. And I mean, when they deviate from the comic, it's not like they're lost at sea.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if anything, it's like these moments show that they had a real creative side too. It's not like they were just taking every single, angle from the comic book and just adapting it. It's like they had to kind of, and probably through force as well, just given that, like you said, they couldn't smash a windshield. So we're like, well, how do we still give that same feeling of feeling like he's lingering around? And we're being watched, but that moment also gives like a ghostly feel because he just kind of appears as if he's like an apparition or something. So that I really enjoy. And it like even the ideas that they had show ambition. Like I think Ullman was saying how he wanted to originally try to shoot it in black and white, which is just like a funny thought that, that's how seriously he's taking it. I really do love that. And Jackson was also talking about when they were initially starting to make, different shots for the film and storyboard it, how he started to actually study film for the first time. And he was like, one of the things he noticed is that very rarely is anybody just center framed. And so you can see them like actively trying to come up with shots that are more interesting, which is great. Kind of reminds me of that funny moment in that Spielberg movie where Lynch plays
The Fablemans.
Yeah, The Fablemans. Yeah, where he's just like, if it's above the horizon or whatever.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, it's just I like you can see the ambition in it, and just how all of these ideas come into play, and whether or not they're strictly from the comic book doesn't really matter. Even the way they have to edit them and zoom in on certain moments. Like I love the part where he's watching them from outside a window, and they give this one shot where his face just gets like right up close to the window, and it kind of just. It appears very.
Wait, is that the pawn shop?
Yes, I
shot
think
that Perry was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the one that they took from the Proteus movie. So that's cool. Is that they liked the Proteus movie and they were like, the stuff that he did well, we're going to apply that into our stuff as well. What impressed me about that shot in particular was that they clearly actually made like a bit of frosted glass with the pawn shop logo on it and then smashed it. And I was like, damn, like that's just again like the little thing that adds like a little bit of what feels like actual production value, even though that was like two buddies in their basement figuring out how to like and put a logo on like frosted glass.
And the risk involved in that too. I think it's actually in the documentary where they're smashing a bit of glass that they made, and they're like, okay. And right before the take is they yell action. They're like, okay, we have one shot at this because it's the only one that we have. So let's hope that we get this shot. And that's exciting, to be honest. There's an excitement to that kind of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is like surprisingly like I gotta be honest, I had a little bit of doubts when I threw this on. I don't know exactly why. I was just like, I don't know, maybe I was like, the idea of like 14-year-olds making a fan film, I was like, why is Perry making us talk about a fan film? And then I threw it on and I was like, this is like one of the most impressively like especially for the main performance, like acted and also like stylishly directed and put together by teenagers. It's super fucked up. It makes me just incredibly jealous. I was like, these kids at like 15 had way better instincts than I would have had making the movies I was making with my friends. They were nowhere near as committed as this, or would ever have looked as good as this.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
You go on. No, you go on.
I was going to say, I think a big example of that too is like actually having the guts to tackle the sexual assault sequence, which I think, given what it is, I think they do incredibly. I don't know if tastefully is the word for something like that, but just the way they do the editing and the way they go about showing pretty much nothing but implying everything, I think does have a sense of maturity, especially for a bunch of 16-year-olds that are tackling this subject matter. You'd think that they'd just be like, oh, let's be edgy or let's just go for it or something like that. And I feel like they're more sporadic, really quick-paced editing and almost like this bad memory, and it's kind of scattered is a lot more effective.
When that sequence eventually plays in full, it does play like we've been kind of building to like this just like traumatic memory that he's almost being reminded of, and it keeps coming back to him, even though we know it's like a motivating factor and keeps, like the fact that the movie does alternate entirely between scenes of him like regrouping at like his like shrine where he's like reminiscing about his long lost and sort of like dead love and alone, and he's having, the memories are coming back as this like depressed like piano score is kind of playing. I'm assuming all of this music they just stole it, but it's really well stolen and really well picked. Sometimes they actually picked like some like needle drops they took from like The Cure, like stuff that was obviously clearly from the comic, but then some other stuff that is like almost has like a bit of a like a Twin Peaksy kind of
Yeah.
sound to it in terms
The
of
synth.
some of the synth stuff, and
like softer.
and yeah, like I think about like that the depressed like piano score that plays during the scenes of him like just like writhing around in agony on the floor, and then being like so motivated by that anger that he's then, okay, now I'm gonna go hunt down and kill these sadistic criminals who are all played by teenagers acting like adults, which is just I loved those scenes too. Like every single time he like breaks into like a heroin den or a cocaine den, and it's a bunch of fucking 15-year-old boys just being like, yo, what if we fucking, did you make your money this week? And then he whips out a switchblade and starts fucking stabbing a 14-year-old to death. I'm like, god damn.
I think too, the way in which the movie shows or doesn't show the sexual assault and the way in which it's so focused on the memory really hammers home how much David Ullman just got what makes The Crow good.
Yeah.
Like he just got what makes it a good comic book, what makes it an effective story. During X, we talked about how that movie really gets to the heart of a kind of brute forced its way to a 15-year-old angst, despair sensibility. And this is the genuine outpouring of that sensibility, you know? This is a very sad and earnest movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think about including that scene where he goes up and chats with the little girl, and he's just like,
beautiful.
this isn't hell, but you can see it from here. And she's like, why does it hurt so much? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, I'm going to come back and we're going to have another conversation later, sweetie.
I've got to say, I'm not crazy about the Proyas movie. And I especially am not, I don't really buy the scenes with the crow and the girl in the Proyas movie. But
do you think these ones are better?
I totally buy the scenes here because it's like, I don't know. It feels very naked the way and he's just talking about how sad everything is, you know?
Well, yeah, there's this one line that I'm assuming it's from the comic, but he says something like, I'm sorry for everything that's happened, and I'm sorry for everything that will happen. Yeah. Which I find, just for him to not sugarcoat it for this young girl, he's just kind of like, things are going to keep getting, like, they're going to be bad. But I'm hoping that there's some type of light.
Yeah, there's a reason I'm back. There's a reason I have come out of my grave, and that's that this is a world of blood and sin, and I'm like the long-haired goth clown here to remind everybody.
But he also says, one day everything will be fair. I truly believe that.
Yeah,
it's not monotone in the misery. There is a hope, and there's real. I mean, The Crow's a love story, and there's a real tenderness to Eric that it comes through. And on the other side of how he really gets The Crow is, so I've seen this movie twice now. I watched this in October with my partner, and then immediately I remember messaging you, Josh, being like, hey, I know what I'm bringing on next year. Like, we got to do this.
Yeah.
And then I watched it again with my partner before. We both love the comic and we love this movie. And something that they pointed out that's very, very sharp is you can tell this is made by a real The Crow head, because he knows what the best image in the comic is. And it's the guy who's dead with "I know why Jesus wept, motherfucker" written in blood over his head. And
that's a great shot.
They really milk the build up to that. It's like a pure fan service.
That's a great scene.
It's a great scene, but it's like this pure fan service moment where, okay, the real heads know, I know why Jesus wept, motherfucker's coming up. And so they're going to keep showing shots of, here's a close-up of the blood dripping down the wall. Here's a close-up of a cigarette burning in his ashtray. Here's a dead guy's face. Yeah. They keep teasing like, are we going to get it yet? Are we going to get it yet? And then finally you get the shot. It's beautiful. It looks great.
It does. I really like the entire buildup of, because that's the one where he's finally looking to get revenge against like the lead goon, the T-Bird character, and that character's like drinking some beer, and I think it's the fun boy character, right, who is the one who ends up murdered in that sequence, and they're just doing it. It's like this noisy industrial like basement apartment they're essentially in. There's this slow push in on Fun Boy, which is maybe my favorite camera choice in the movie, because it is so patient and it is so like, I would, as a 15-year-old, I would not be like, we're gonna slow dolly in on this guy doing heroin. That is just not something that would even occur to my brain at that age to do. And so the fact that it's like a 30-second like slow dolly as he's decided that he's gonna start shooting up heroin, and there's like these crazy like bass chugs, and the crow lands in the window before Eric reveals that he's sitting there watching it and lighting his cigarette for him and giving him the quote-unquote painless death that he promised him for helping him hunt down the other guys throughout the movie that he's been murdering. Because he just goes frequently he just walks into a room and he just like fires a shotgun in 3 different directions at guys and kills them all. But this is the one guy he kind of treats like a little bit nicer here. And yeah, giving this guy like the just, shooting him up, cutting him a bit so that it's like he's passing out and like bleeding out and like dying at the kitchen table essentially. And then climaxing on that shot of "I know why Jesus wept, motherfucker" just written on the walls is, such a good thing. And the fact that Perry, it was so funny, you like sent me shots that you were reading in the comic book, and you sent me that shot literally like half an hour later. I think I watched that shot in the actual movie, and I was so prepared to be like, wow, okay, he literally did steal the exact panel.
Yeah,
really, really well done.
I love this
and
movie.
Then he kills the truly evil one.
Yeah, T-Bird is the guy who needs to die the worst for sure. Because all the other ones, I don't know, they're also pretty bad too, I guess. But
they're all terrible. But I guess the other ones kind of get these moments of like, or not really the other ones.
A lot of them get shot in the head in like a poker room or something. Yeah. Whereas like T-Bird gets the long, drawn out, like you need to like suffer while you're dying.
But they don't show it. Neither in the comic or the movie do they actually show him dying. They show him looking up, and you're going to see that Eric's going to beat him death with a hammer. But then it's this weird kind of anti-catharsis where it just cuts from that to Eric going back to the graveyard being like, all right, time to die.
Do they show the bit of him like taunting with the theatricality of it though? Because that was maybe my favorite moment that I didn't remember if it was like anything like that appears in the Proyas one or not. But like I loved that moment when he's just like letting himself, like giving him the gun in the middle of like the highway fight that they're on, where he's like appeared in the back of his car, let him drive to the side of the stretch of the road where both he and his fiance were assaulted and killed, and he kicks the shit out of him but lets the gun fall so that he picks it up, so that T-Bird picks it up and shoots him a bunch in the gut, and then sits there and like maniacally laughs because he's being like, he knows that he's striking fear in this guy being like, because what's the line too? He's like, "You got any last words, ghost man?"
Yeah, ghost man.
And then he says, "The crow said, don't look." And then he just kind of goes,
I'll see you in hell.
Yeah, it's and before reappearing obviously with the hammer and being like, "I have made a show of the fact that I am a ghost come back to haunt you and strike the fear of God into you," essentially. And then and just implying that he's gonna beat him to death with a hammer. And
I gotta say too, like just the black and white imagery of the rain going off, the headlights being the lighting, and him just like he's
looks good.
Yeah, he's walking up to him with all the bullet holes in his chest, and he's just bleeding down and he's still walking confidently. It looks awesome. It really does give that whole vibe of the Crow. Like it's really interesting to watch something like this where, obviously you can clearly see some of the budget limitations, but the actual vibe of it all and the energy it gives off is incredibly similar, if not the same, to the Crow that we're more familiar with. Yeah. And that's just impressive on its own, let alone some of the things that they actually do just based on their own ideas and stuff. These are, again, this was made by 14 to 18-year-olds. Like, it's crazy when you really break it down.
Yeah, I was really impressed by this. And if we're pivoting towards reductive rating round, James O'Barr's The Crow, this is a 4-star movie. It just is. Yeah. I really do think that, like, and I do like probably more than Perry, probably also because I haven't read the comic. My only sort of context for The Crow previous to watching this was the Alex Proyas and the Brandon Lee version. And I liked Brandon Lee growing up, and I liked that movie a lot. And I obviously was just really into like that 90s goth rock, like industrial kind of look that Proyas was going for. So that was my only familiarity with The Crow. And I do agree though that like the expensive studio adaptation made by a for-hire music video director, it does have like a little bit of, he is trying to compensate for something he thinks is maybe a little lame and trying to make it cool. Sure. And I think where the heart and soul of that movie is in, I think Brandon Lee and his performance is really going for it and doing something more earnest than the movie is doing. And I think that's maybe the push and pull of that, of watching the expensive Hollywood adaptation. And I totally agree that this version is made by a super fan who really gets it, who is at the right age to not care that the things that are earnest or sentimental about it are like pathetically or embarrassingly so. And that doesn't even occur to him because that doesn't matter. The depth of the emotion of what's being expressed in the comic and how vulnerable and painful and clearly informed by real suffering it is something that clearly he's attracted to. And that perspective on it, that exact like emo angst age you are at like 14 and 15 and 16, like I think he is channeling that arguably even more effectively. And I would probably, you know, not even say arguably if I was more familiar with the comic, because this is going to convince me. I'm going to finally probably read it and come back to this again at some point, because I really, really liked this. And I do think for a certain viewer, if you're listening to the show this many years in, I'm sure you're also someone who can put aside the fact that it's a do-it-yourself movie made by high schoolers. We don't always talk about that, but we've talked a lot about a lot of do-it-yourself, like micro-budget art. And again, I would compare this to something like the work of Charles Pinion, or we didn't talk about a lot, but again, Jim Van Beber, if anyone has seen Deadbeat at Dawn, like that is also someone probably trying to make actually like a cooler movie than this, because they're older. It was all the money he was going to put into going to film school. He put into like making this like gory Ohio action movie. But the fact that that's also an Ohio guy is fucking sick, and that is what unites these two. I think, like, what was the ambition in just like Ohio guys to go out and make these like actually really sick guerrilla genre exploitation movies? And I don't know, I watched this and I just went, man, I was impressed by shot choices, by editing choices, many of which sure are panel for panel from the comic book, but as Perry has outlined, also many of which were not, and were just in like natural instinctual choices by what I think are good filmmakers. And so like that is the rain, mud, blood soaked shot on video, black and white expressionist horror look and atmosphere of this movie is legit. And I do think that David Ullman as an actor, sometimes he's doing like a method acting informed by Brandon Lee performance, but he totally broods, he totally monologues in a completely earnestly despairing way that works. Soundtrack choices are moody and droning, really well done. And this has got to be the best movie made by high schoolers, and maybe like one of the best fan films, unofficial fan films I've ever seen. Like these have got to be like two modes of filmmaking that are like the most disreputable of any kind. And it's insane to me that this is as good as it is. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It is on YouTube, please.
Yeah, I'm also gonna for it. I think it's awesome. This is the kind of thing that I find incredibly inspiring, and it's also one of those things that makes me, it's like weirdly jealous, because I'd also have to travel back in time to really feel it. But it's like, I wish I could do something like this as a teenager. There's no way I had.
I don't know if I can make something this good like now.
For like, sure. Good for them. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not even trying to take that away. Absolutely. Like the focus that this would take, the honestly, just like the balls and vulnerability. It's awesome. And I think it's really amazing how they keep such a consistent tone. And I think like there's a great lead performance in here. There's really good ideas that they're applying. There's a good sense of editing and rhythm. And again, this is made by 14 to 18 year olds. It's pretty crazy. And yeah, there's just a couple moments that I liked. Like I love that one shot when they're in the alleyway where it's like two drug dealers talking. And I'm pretty sure they got this probably from the comic, but there's this like low angle shot that looks like the sky, the buildings above them are really high up, and you can see the night sky and everything. There's also this really cool part where Eric is just resurrected, and he's kind of bleeding and going into this abandoned warehouse or house or something like that. And there's all these like metal pipes and this kind of framing as he enters into it. It shows that they were really thinking about what they wanted to put on screen. And it's very impressive throughout. But yeah, and again, I've got a band that's from Ohio, and it does feel like I've known a lot of bands that have come out of Ohio that I think are some of the best that I've ever watched live or anything like that. And art in general, as we do this show, seems to come out from here, especially things like this. And it feels like it comes from just a place.
Did you guys got to contact David Ullman and see if he'll do your next music video or something?
Oh my God.
Holy shit. That would be so sick. But yeah, it just feels like a place where, I don't know, people feel like maybe they don't have access to the industry, so they just do it themselves. And there's just such passion behind a lot of the projects that I've seen come out of the state. So, yeah, really cool. 4 out of 5. And if anyone wants to check it out, I will have it linked on my Letterboxd because it's on YouTube and fully available. And check out the after you watch it, check out the Art of Darkness documentary style inertia, where they explain like how they made it and all the the things they had to overcome and everything. Is really interesting and very cool, very inspiring. I
got to give it a 5, I guess, right? I mean,
hell yeah,
I
have to,
Let's do it.
It's just a beautiful movie. I don't know. I've been gushing about it for an hour, and I just want to watch it again. I think it really captures the heart of The Crow, and so it captures the heart of late 20th century goth art. It really gets it, and I just love this movie completely. It also is great Ohioan cinema, as mentioned, and that might actually be what pushed it from the 4 into the 5, because a lot of good stuff there. I mean, Jim Jarmusch, David Ullman, Jim Van Bebber. Yeah.
Those are the 3 guys.
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore of Ohio filmmaking right there. Well,
Mark Mothersbaugh directs some of his own music videos, so we can throw him in,
There you go. But yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. And I think that is going to wrap it up here, though. That was, once again, X from 1996 and James O'Barr's The Crow from 1998. Thanks again, Perry, for once again coming on and for once again showing us a movie that has less than 200 logs on Letterboxd that we all loved and should see, and every one of our listeners should see. This is what we come to you for. We always trust you. But for our listeners, where can they find what you're working on? Is there anything that you can plug while you're here?
Yeah, I had a short story published just a couple weeks ago called Directions on keepplanning.net, but you can find all of my writing at perryruhland.com. Perry Ruhland is one word.com, and that has a list of everything with links to everything that's online.
Beautiful.
Hell yeah. Well, we can highly recommend doing that. For our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time where, as Jamie alluded to, next week over on the Patreon, we are going to be going Bride of Frankenstein mode finally, and we are going to be pairing it with Frankenhooker. Because that was just a double feature I've dreamed about doing for a long time. Bride of Frankenstein's maybe my favorite Universal monster movie just in general, and Frankenhooker is for anyone who hasn't seen it, like shockingly great. When I threw it on for the first time, I really was like, really, you just called it Frankenhooker, and I didn't know who Frank Henenlotter was for the longest time. And then what really bumped me up to watching it was when we did Basket Case and Brain Damage, and I was like, this is the guy who made Frankenhooker? Clearly that's like actually probably a sick movie, and it is. Yeah. So very stoked to do a classic and also a trashy exploitation version of Lady Frankenstein. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are actually going to be back, and we're going to be going Hong Kong action mode with Lau Kar Leung's Tiger on the Beat with a special guest, which I'm very excited to talk about. Very of the Hong Kong movies that are currently being restored in 4K and people are watching, I do think that Tiger on the Beat might go under the radar for some, but it is arguably one of the most insane Chow Yun-Fat movies in the catalog, including him doing some crazy work with a shotgun, some crazy work with a chainsaw, and obviously having some amazing Lau Kar Leung choreographed action sequences, which anyone familiar with Shaw Brothers should be familiar with what he's capable of. So seeing him go sort of like heroic bloodshed movie mode is something truly special. I'm excited to talk about that, and I'm not sure exactly what we're pairing it with yet, but I think we might be pairing it with the sequel Tiger on the Beat 2, because none of us have seen Tiger on the Beat 2, and I'm sure there's going to be good stuff in that, even if it's maybe not as good as a sick chainsaw fight.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to beat a sick chainsaw fight, that is for sure, but come on, I want to see both.
Yep. So that's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time over on the main feed. But that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, as always, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.